Taehyung's wedding invite list leaked, and Jungkook's name was missing. What he posted hours later sent ARMY into complete meltdown. Is this a joke? Jin's voice cracked through the quiet room, slicing through the tension that had settled like a storm cloud. Jungkook didn't answer. His jaw was tight, his phone clenched in his fist as the screen glowed with a leaked guest list posted by a fan account that never missed a detail. Hundreds of familiar names. Managers? Friends? Family? Even old industry acquaintances. But not his. Not Jungkook. The air around him was thick, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of the heater. Taehyung was getting married. That part wasn't new. Speculation had swirled for weeks, fueled by blurred photos, subtle Instagram captions, and a ring that didn't seem like just another accessory. But Jungkook not being invited? That was more than news. That was betrayal. The wedding date was confirmed. Next Friday, in a remote estate in Jeju, guest list restricted, phones banned. Private, intimate, perfect. And still, he hadn't been told. Not even a message. Not even a courtesy call. Not even a goodbye. His fingers hovered over the screen. Twitter notifications exploded at the top bar. Fans had already noticed. Already asked. Already panicked. Is Jungkook attending? Why isn't he mentioned? Did something happen? He locked the screen and leaned back in his chair, eyes unfocused, mind replaying the last real conversation they'd had. 3 months ago, backstage at the awards. Taehyung had been laughing his real laugh, the one that crinkled his eyes and dropped his guard, and then Jungkook had said something that made it disappear. He couldn't remember what exactly. Something about trust. Something about timing. That laugh hadn't returned since. And now this. Jungkook stood up, the wooden floor groaning beneath his sudden movement. His apartment felt smaller than ever. He walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the glass. Seoul's skyline glittered in the distance, a sea of lights that felt strangely indifferent tonight. He could feel the pressure building behind his ribs, behind his eyes. But tears wouldn't fall. He wouldn't let them. Not for this. Not yet. Instead, he opened Twitter. He stared at the blinking cursor, his mind spinning through everything he could say. Everything he shouldn't say. He knew how fast things spread. How fast ARMY would react. How quickly the narrative would spin out of control. But the silence hurt more. So, he typed, "Sometimes the people you thought you'd stand beside forever forget to look back." Yike? He pressed send. The tweet detonated within seconds. Notifications rolled in like an avalanche. Screenshots, translations, speculation, theories. It didn't take long before his name trended. And Taehyung's. And the word wedding. But none of that mattered. Not yet. His phone rang. He stared at the name on the screen. Jimin. He almost didn't answer. But his thumb betrayed him. Young, he whispered, voice raw. "I saw," Jimin said softly. No greeting. No pretending. Jungkook leaned against the wall, heart pounding. "Did you know?" A pause. Then, "He made his choice, Jungkook." The words landed like a knife. Cold, precise, brutal. But why? Jungkook's voice cracked for the first time. Jimin didn't answer. Not right away. Then, with a sigh that sounded like it had been dragged from the bottom of his lungs, "Because some truths are easier to bury than to face." Jungkook felt his knees buckle slightly. He slid to the floor, still clutching the phone, still not ready to understand. Outside, Seoul didn't stop. Cars moved, lights blinked. The world didn't care about fractured friendships or unspoken words, but the fandom did. Screenshots of his tweet were now on every major outlet. Fan accounts were threading timelines. Theories about their fallout resurfaced. Edits with sad music flooded TikTok. Hashtags like #Taekook split and #Justice for Jungkook trended globally. Then something unexpected happened. Taehyung posted. It was a black screen. Just text. White. Simple. "You were always invited, but you walked away first." The internet froze. Jungkook stared at the screen, chest tightening. Then, he laughed. Not because it was funny, Because it hurt in a way only honesty could. He typed again. Walking away doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes it means saving yourself. The line between reality and story was now so blurred even their closest friends didn't know what to say. Yoongi messaged once, just a thumbs up. Namjoon sent a voice note he never opened. The days passed like shadows. And then the wedding came. Photos leaked. Taehyung stood on a marble terrace, dressed in white, a serene smile on his face. But it was the group shot that broke everything. Jin, J-Hope, Jimin, Namjoon, even Yoongi, who rarely appeared anywhere. Everyone but him. The comments were brutal. Heartbroken fans, conspiracy threads, think pieces. And then came the twist. Jungkook posted a video. No words. Just a quiet shot of him sitting in a studio, guitar in hand. He played a soft melody, haunting and familiar. At the end, he whispered, "This one was supposed to be yours." Twitter didn't just shake, it cracked. Armies cried. Even locals tuned in. The hashtag number Jungkook for Taehyung hit Hwasong globally. Theories raged. Were they fighting? Was it deeper? Was there something fans didn't know? The answer was yes. But no one would ever fully understand. Not the silence between them. Not the words left unsaid. And definitely not the weight of knowing that love, platonic, brotherly, or something else, could fracture without warning. When the dust settled, Taehyung disabled comments. Jungkook archived the tweet. And the world moved on. But the fans didn't forget. Because sometimes the most heartbreaking stories don't end in explosions. They end in echoes. The studio was quiet, save for the dull hum of equipment resting in standby mode, and Jungkook sat slouched on the low leather couch, his eyes tracing the faded cracks on the ceiling above. The scent of wood polish and stale coffee lingered in the air, grounding him in a place that used to mean everything: safety, creation, honesty. But now it felt too large, too hollow, like everything he had known was stretching away from him, slipping into silence. His guitar leaned against the side of the couch, untouched for hours. The strings were still perfectly in tune, but somehow, every chord he struck felt off. Not because the notes were wrong, but because they didn't belong to anyone anymore. He glanced at the empty mic stand in front of him, a quiet phantom that echoed memories too sharp to touch. The tweet still haunted him. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. Because no matter how eloquently Taehyung tried to lace guilt in soft white letters on a black screen, the pain didn't soften. "You were always invited," he had written. But Jungkook knew that words could lie, especially when used to rewrite the truth. He remembered the look in Taehyung's eyes the last time they spoke, distant, defensive, almost tired. It wasn't hate. That would have been easier. It was something colder, something like resignation. A choice had already been made long before the invitations ever went out. Jimin arrived without knocking. He never knocked. Jungkook didn't even look up, just listened as the door creaked open and his footsteps padded softly into the room. Jimin didn't speak either. He simply walked to the wall, lowered the blinds a little to dim the light, then sank into the seat beside him. For a long time, they sat in silence. "He looked for you," Jimin finally whispered, barely above the hum of the equipment. "At the wedding." Jungkook scoffed, dry and humorless. "That's cute." "I'm serious," Jimin pressed, his tone firm but soft, like walking on broken glass. He stood by the archway longer than he was supposed to. The coordinator had to nudge him twice. Jungkook said nothing. Jimin turned to face him, eyes scanning Jungkook's profile. "He wanted you there. Then why didn't he call?" Jungkook's voice cracked unexpectedly. "Why not even a message? He had my number, my address, my face. Hell, he's the only one who knew my passcode until last year." Jimin hesitated. "Because he thought you wouldn't come." Jungkook laughed again, but this time it trembled at the end. "So, instead of risking rejection, he decided to erase me?" "No, he didn't erase you." Jimin reached over, placing a hand on Jungkook's knee. "He tried to protect himself. Maybe that's cowardly. Maybe it's cruel. But it wasn't about you not mattering." "Then, what was it about?" "Pain," Jimin whispered. Regret. All the words you both never said. Jungkook shook his head and stood, pacing toward the mixing console, running his hands along the surface like he could find stability in circuits and sliders. We had years, Jimin. Years to say what mattered. And instead, we buried it under tours, photo shoots, fake smiles. Because it was easier, Jimin replied without missing a beat. Because it's terrifying to admit when someone owns a part of your soul, especially when you don't know if they want it back. That made Jungkook stop. He turned slowly, the weight of Jimin's words anchoring him to the floor. You think he still? I don't know what he still feels, Jimin cut in gently. But I know what he lost. I saw it in his eyes when the music started, when the vows were read, when you weren't there. Jungkook sat down again, slower this time, his voice nearly breaking. I thought, maybe if I stayed silent, he'd come find me. That maybe he'd fight for me this time. Maybe he thought the same. Outside, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the quiet war unfolding in that studio. Twitter was still unraveling in chaos edits of Jungkook's song, Taehyung's post, wild fan theories about hidden messages in their lyrics, and even older videos being reanalyzed for tension. But in this room, only the truth mattered. Jungkook finally reached for the guitar, letting his fingers strum slowly, absently, as if warming up not just the instrument, but something in him that had gone cold. He's not back yet, is he? He asked. No, Jimin said. He extended the honeymoon. No one knows where he is. Jungkook's jaw tensed again. Running away. Classic. Or trying to breathe, Jimin said quietly. The melody Jungkook played shifted darker, more raw. It sounded like mourning, like loss pretending to be a song. And Jimin closed his eyes, letting it fill the space. Then Jungkook stopped playing and whispered, I still dream about him, about the rooftop. That night, in 2021 when it rained and he said, We'll always be this, right? Jimin opened his eyes, blinking away the sting. You never told me that. I didn't tell anyone. Jungkook looked at the wall across from him, the one where Taehyung's old Polaroid still hung faded and curled at the edges. He hadn't had the heart to take it down. Not even now. I should have said something back then, Jungkook continued. Should have told him what I felt. It's not too late, Jimin said gently. Jungkook shook his head. Isn't it? No, Jimin said. But only if you're willing to be brave. And then, as if the universe was listening, Jungkook's phone buzzed. They both stared at it. Unknown number. His heart kicked against his ribs. Something about the timing felt too perfect to be coincidence. He hesitated, hand hovering over the screen. Then he answered, Hello, silence. Then a breath. Then a voice he knew better than his own. Can I see you? Jungkook's throat closed. For a second, he forgot how to speak. Taehyung didn't wait. I'm back in Seoul. I'm alone. And I need to talk to you. Jungkook looked at Jimin, who nodded silently, understanding in his eyes. Okay. Jungkook finally breathed. He hung up, and suddenly, it all came rushing back, the weight, the memories, the unfinished symphony between them. But this time, maybe, just maybe, they'd play it to the end. Jungkook sat frozen, the final word from the call echoing in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. I need to talk to you. Those 6 words had torn through the carefully constructed walls he'd built in the last few weeks, unraveling the numbness that had protected him from confronting everything he didn't want to feel. And now he felt all of it. Every regret. Every almost. Every breath that had carried Taehyung's name without permission. He didn't speak for several minutes. Simply held the phone in his lap, head bowed. Jimin didn't press. He understood the silence well. It was the sound of someone being peeled open from the inside. When Jungkook finally stood, his movements were slow, like a man wading through thick water. He walked toward the coat rack, grabbing the denim jacket that still smelled faintly of his cologne. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. Jimin followed him to the door and rested his hand briefly on Jungkook's shoulder, grounding him without words. The look they shared was enough. Jungkook walked out into the dusk-drenched city, the sky a bruised gradient of purple and red. The streets felt quieter than usual. Maybe it was just his mind screaming louder. Maybe the world had shrunk to the point where only this moment existed. He walked without checking directions, feet taking him somewhere they remembered even if his heart had forgotten how to hope. When he reached the building, he hesitated. The entrance to the rooftop lounge was just as he remembered it. Metal gate, rusted edges, the keypad slightly crooked like someone had once punched it out of frustration. He tapped in the old code, half expecting it to be changed. It wasn't. The gate clicked open, and he stepped inside. Each stair creaked in rhythm with his heartbeat. With every step, memories clawed their way up his spine. The laughter, the shared secrets, the way Taehyung used to lean against the rail like the sky belonged to him. Jungkook remembered sitting here one summer night with a sketchpad, while Taehyung hummed an unfinished melody into the wind. They had promised to never forget that feeling, that closeness, but time had a way of testing promises. The final door was slightly ajar. The cool breeze hit first, followed by the scent of jasmine and smoke. Then he saw him. Taehyung stood near the edge, hands in his pockets, face turned toward the horizon. His profile was illuminated by the dying sun, casting gold over the sharp lines of his jaw, the soft curl of his lashes. He hadn't changed much, still effortlessly composed, still carved from silence and elegance. Jungkook didn't speak at first. He just watched. Taehyung turned when the door clicked shut behind him. His expression shifted something between relief and sorrow. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. Jungkook nodded, his throat dry. "You said you wanted to talk." "I do." Taehyung looked away for a moment, gathering himself. "I should have invited you. I should have called before everything happened. I was scared." Jungkook took a slow step forward. "Scared of what?" "Of you not showing up, of hearing you say you didn't care anymore, of making the biggest decision of my life and not seeing you in the crowd." Taehyung exhaled shakily. "So I took the easy way out. I left you out before you could leave me." "That's not fair," Jungkook said, voice sharp and cracking with restrained emotion. "You didn't even give me the chance." "I know." Silence folded between them like a sheet of glass. Delicate, transparent, but deadly if shattered. Jungkook stepped closer. "You were my best friend, Tae. More than that, and you let it all disappear." Taehyung turned to face him fully now, and the vulnerability in his eyes was enough to break something loose in Jungkook's chest. "I never stopped caring," Taehyung said. "I just didn't know how to fix what we broke." "Then why marry her?" The question escaped before Jungkook could contain it. Taehyung flinched slightly, but didn't avoid the blow. "Because I thought it would help me forget you." The words hit like thunder. Jungkook stared at him, breath caught, the sky swirling above them as if nature itself had reacted to the confession. Taehyung continued, voice soft, eyes locked on Jungkook's. "But I couldn't. Not at the altar, not during the vows, not even on the plane when we left. Everything reminded me of you. Every silence felt like you not speaking. Every song felt like something we once wrote." "Then why didn't you come back sooner?" Jungkook whispered. "Because I thought you hated me," Taehyung admitted. "The way the internet spun it, the way you looked in that video, I thought I lost you completely." "You did," Jungkook said, eyes glistening. "But not forever." Taehyung took a tentative step forward. "Is there still a part of you that's mine?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He looked at the rooftop, the city beneath them, the memories draped across every brick and breeze. Then he looked at Taehyung. Really looked. Past the pain. Past the fear. "I don't know what we are anymore," he said slowly. "But I know I don't want to lose what's left." Taehyung nodded, his throat moving as he swallowed emotion. "Then let's not lose it." They stood in the golden twilight, side by side, hearts frayed but open, words exhausted but real. There was no grand resolution, no perfect reconciliation. Just two men who had loved and hurt and still chose to face each other after everything. Jungkook sat on the ledge, motioning to the spot beside him. Taehyung sat, and for the first time in months, they watched the sun set together not as strangers, not as echoes, but as two souls trying to find their way back through the wreckage. Maybe this was the start of something new. Or Maybe it was simply the moment they stopped pretending they were okay without each other. The breeze thickened as the sky folded deeper into night, and neither of them moved from that ledge. They didn't speak for a long while. Words had already done enough damage. Instead, silence carried the weight of everything they'd once said and everything they hadn't. Jungkook's fingers tapped softly on the edge of the railing, a quiet rhythm that mirrored the pulse beneath his skin. Beside him, Taehyung shifted slightly, knees pulled to his chest, elbows resting there. From the outside, they looked like two friends watching the stars. But inside, they were still sifting through a battlefield. Jungkook finally broke the silence. "Do you love her?" Taehyung blinked slowly, the question hitting like a sudden change in wind. "I thought I could," he said after a beat. "I convinced myself that comfort was enough. That maybe love didn't have to be loud or terrifying or complicated." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "But it wasn't enough." "No?" Taehyung's voice dropped. "Because when I stood beside her, all I could think about was the first time you fell asleep on my shoulder in Tokyo. How I didn't move for 2 hours because I didn't want to wake you. How proud I felt just having you there. And I hated myself for thinking about you while she was looking at me like I was her world." Jungkook stared ahead, eyes glossy. "You married someone else while still in love with me." Taehyung didn't deny it. "I thought I could turn it off. I thought if I walked far enough in the opposite direction, maybe my heart would forget what your name sounds like when it's whispered into a pillow." Jungkook's breath hitched. "It never forgets, does it?" "No," Taehyung whispered. "It just aches quieter." A plane blinked across the dark sky, and both of them followed its path, as if watching something neither of them could touch. Jungkook leaned back against the wall, head tilted up. "Do you regret it?" "Every day," Taehyung said instantly. "Not because she's a bad person. She's kind. She's calm. But she never made me feel like I was burning. And I thought maybe fire wasn't necessary. That maybe warmth would be enough. But I missed the burn." "And now?" Jungkook asked. Taehyung looked at him. "Now I miss you more than I know what to do with." There it was. A truth so raw it stole the air between them. Jungkook turned slowly, eyes locking with Taehyung's in the dark. Neither looked away. "But I'm not yours anymore," Jungkook said, voice barely audible. "I know," Taehyung replied, his voice cracked. "But I'd rather be your regret than forget what it felt like to love you." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Jungkook stood slowly and walked toward the far side of the rooftop. He needed space, air, something that wasn't heavy with memory. He leaned forward, both hands gripping the railing as the wind whipped against his face. "I waited," he said suddenly, not turning around. "After your engagement announcement, after the pictures, even after I saw the dress fittings on Instagram, I waited for you to show up, to text, to say anything." "I wanted to," Taehyung said from behind him. "I typed out 100 messages, but every time, I imagined your silence. I imagined hurting her. I imagined making everything worse. So you did nothing." Taehyung's voice cracked. "Yes." Jungkook turned, his face unreadable, voice calm but dangerous. "And now you think you can just say, 'I regret it,' and everything will be okay?" "No," Taehyung said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just couldn't keep it in anymore." "Why now?" Jungkook asked. "Why not last week? Last month? Why not when you still had time to make a different choice?" "Because I saw your video," Taehyung admitted. "The one in the studio. You whispered, 'This one was supposed to be yours,' and it destroyed me." Jungkook looked away. Taehyung walked closer, one step at a time, carefully. "That night, after I saw it, I left the hotel. I walked for hours. I deleted the photos. I turned off my phone. I told her I needed space." Jungkook turned back sharply. "You left her?" "I asked for time. For honesty," Taehyung said. "I owed her the truth. I told her I never stopped loving you. That I was lying to myself. That I couldn't do this anymore without knowing if there was still anything left between us." Jungkook swallowed hard. "And what did she say?" "She cried," Taehyung said, voice raw. "Then she said she always knew." Jungkook's eyes burned. "She knew about us?" She said she knew I looked at you differently. That the way I talked about you wasn't how people talk about their friends. Jungkook took a shaky breath and sat down again, back against the wall, arms crossed over his chest like he was holding himself together. Taehyung didn't move for a moment, then sat beside him again, but not too close. Not yet. So, Jungkook said after a long pause. What now? I don't know, Taehyung admitted. I'm not here to ask for a second chance. I just needed you to know that it was real. That what we had meant more to me than I ever said. It meant everything to me, Jungkook said softly. That's the problem. Taehyung turned, watching him carefully. I don't want to hurt you again. You already did, Jungkook replied. But that doesn't mean I want you gone. They sat in the dark, two silhouettes outlined by city lights, and somewhere in the distance, a saxophone played from a street musician they couldn't see. The melody curled around them like fog, beautiful, haunting, unfinished. Jungkook reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring, simple, elegant, worn. He turned it over in his fingers. I was going to give you this, he said, holding it up to the moonlight. Before all of it, before everything fell apart. Taehyung stared at it, eyes wide. You kept it? I couldn't throw it away, Jungkook said. Not when it still felt like the only thing real. Taehyung reached out, slowly, hesitantly. Jungkook didn't stop him. Their fingers touched. For a moment, neither moved. Then Jungkook dropped the ring into his palm. Taehyung looked down at it, then back at Jungkook. Do you still believe in us? Jungkook didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either.
The city beneath them glimmered like a constellation made of shattered glass, beautiful and sharp, sprawling with life that felt both too fast and too distant. Jungkook hadn't moved. Neither had Taehyung. The ring sat in the older man's hand, its silver surface catching the moonlight like a question waiting to be answered. Jungkook's eyes weren't on the ring. They were fixed on the skyline, but his heart was caught in that tiny circle of metal that once meant promise, loyalty, the kind of forever that didn't need to be spoken, allowed to be understood. And now it lay between them again, a symbol no longer of a vow, but of the time lost in trying to avoid the truth. Taehyung didn't close his hand around it. Instead, he held it open, letting the cool night air graze it like a secret suspended in limbo. His voice was low when he spoke, barely louder than the hum of the wind threading through the steel rails around them. If I could undo it, he said, everything I would. Jungkook exhaled slowly. You can't, we're past that now. I know, Taehyung murmured, but I still needed to say it. The silence between them wasn't like before. It wasn't cold or broken. It was hesitant, searching. It was filled with 1,000 versions of what could have been, all converging in this moment where the past clung to the present like mist on skin. Jungkook finally turned his head, meeting Taehyung's gaze. The pain there wasn't bitter anymore. It was tender, exhausted. But there was a flicker of something beneath it, something unspoken that hadn't yet died. Do you remember the night after Busan? Jungkook asked. Taehyung's lips twitched just barely. The rooftop, the storm. Jungkook nodded. You kissed me. We didn't even talk about it after, just carried on like nothing happened. I was terrified, Taehyung admitted. Not of the kiss, but of what it meant. It meant everything, Jungkook said, to me. To me too. There was a beat, then another. I didn't run because I didn't feel it, Taehyung added. I ran because I did. Jungkook smiled bitterly. And then you ran straight into someone else. Taehyung flinched. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it? Jungkook asked, not accusing, just tired. You chose her, T. You made vows to someone else while I was still waiting for you to admit you loved me. I didn't know how to be yours. You didn't even try. The silence cracked then like the air had been carved open, but neither raised their voice. This wasn't a fight. This was grief trying to put itself into words. Taehyung looked back down at the ring in his hand, the weight of it burning. You deserved someone braver than me. Jungkook looked away. Maybe, but I didn't want anyone else. Taehyung's throat bobbed. Do you still feel it even now? Jungkook paused. I don't know what I feel. I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm tired. But when you called me tonight, I still came. That has to mean something. It means everything, Taehyung said. They sat with that for a while. The wind blew stronger now, whispering between them, weaving its way into the tension like a quiet mediator. Taehyung finally slipped the ring into his pocket, not as an answer but as a reminder. I'm not asking for us to go back, he said. I'm asking if we can start from where we are. And where is that? Jungkook asked. Taehyung's voice cracked as he replied, somewhere between forgiveness and hope. Jungkook leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't try to hide it. He was tired of pretending to be unaffected, tired of acting like it hadn't wrecked him to watch Taehyung's wedding from behind a screen, alone, silent, invisible. I don't know how to trust you again, he admitted. I don't expect you to, Taehyung said. Not tonight. Then why did you come? Because I'd rather spend the rest of my life trying to earn your trust again than spend another day pretending I don't love you. Jungkook closed his eyes. There it was, the confession he'd wanted for years, the one that came too late and yet still made his heart skip like it had heard something sacred. He wanted to reject it. He wanted to pull it into his chest and never let it go. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. Instead, he just whispered, then stay, just sit here. Don't promise me anything, don't ask for anything back, just be here. Taehyung didn't hesitate. Okay. So they sat in silence once more, not as lovers, not as strangers, but as something in between. They didn't know what tomorrow held. They didn't know how much damage could be undone or how much they still had to lose. But they knew this: neither had moved, neither had walked away. That night, as the city blinked beneath them and the stars began to pierce the black sky, two souls remained side by side, nursing old wounds with new stillness. And maybe, just maybe, healing could begin. The rooftop had fallen into a thick, moon-drenched quiet, the kind that didn't ask for conversation but still pulsed with meaning. The sky had deepened into ink, stars barely blinking through the thin haze above Seoul, as if even the cosmos were too uncertain to fully show themselves. Below, the city murmured, car horns faint and distant, the occasional bark of a dog, the shiver of wind running along glass windows of buildings where lives carried on, blissfully unaware of the quiet ache unfolding between two figures seated side by side above it all. Jungkook's breath fogged slightly as he leaned forward again, elbows on knees, hands clasped loosely like he was still holding on to something that wasn't there. Taehyung sat with his shoulders curved in, chin tucked, fingers pressed together like prayer. They hadn't spoken in several minutes, but it wasn't silence that cut. It was everything the silence contained. Words too dangerous to say, memories too sharp to resurface, hopes that hadn't yet died but no longer knew how to breathe. Jungkook's voice came soft, hesitant. Do you remember Paris? Taehyung turned his head, surprised not at the reference but at the tone, gentle, almost wistful. Which part? The river, Jungkook said. When we snuck out after sound check and just sat on that bench, you were humming something I never heard again. Taehyung's lips curved at the memory, a shadow of a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I wrote it for you. I figured, Jungkook murmured. You never looked at anyone else the way you looked at me that night. Taehyung's gaze fell. It scared me, how easy it felt. Jungkook nodded. Yeah, me too. Their eyes met again, soft with shared remembrance. That night had been brief, uneventful to the world, but for them it had felt like a quiet promise, the kind made not with words but with presence. That night had been theirs. I wrote lyrics for that melody once, Jungkook said, a little color in his cheeks, but I never showed you. I wish you had. You didn't seem like you wanted to see. Taehyung closed his eyes for a moment, a breath drawing deep through his chest. I wanted everything. I just didn't know how to want it out loud. Jungkook looked away again, his voice tight. You were always good at hiding. And you were always good at hopping, Taehyung replied. Another pause. Another layer peeled back, slowly, carefully, like removing gauze from an old wound. I didn't cry when you got married, Jungkook said after a long time. Not because I wasn't broken, but because I felt like if I did, it would mean I had to let go of everything, and I wasn't ready to do that. Taehyung turned toward him fully, heart in his throat. I didn't cry either. Jungkook's laugh was hollow. No, you smiled for the cameras. You kissed her like it meant forever. Taehyung's eyes darkened. Do you think it didn't tear me apart? I was performing, just like we used to. I wore the suit like it was armor, smiled like it was a mask. But inside, I was holding your ghost the entire time. Jungkook flinched. I saw you in the back of my mind, Taehyung continued, voice trembling. I imagined you singing, smiling, standing where she stood, and I hated myself. Then why did you go through with it? Jungkook snapped, sudden heat rising to the surface. Why didn't you stop it, walk away, tell me the truth? Because I was a coward, Taehyung said, no defense in his tone, just raw honesty. Because I'd spent so long running from what I felt that I thought if I just kept running, it would eventually disappear. And did it? Jungkook asked, fire in his voice. Taehyung looked him dead in the eye, not even for a second. The confession hung between them like thunder before a downpour. Jungkook's chest rose and fell faster now, his fists tight at his sides. But it wasn't just anger. It was grief. It was longing. It was every second they'd lost trying to be what the world expected instead of what their hearts had whispered at night. I didn't need grand gestures, Jungkook said finally, voice low. I just needed the truth. I needed you to show up for once, not as a performer, not as just, as you. I'm here now, Taehyung said. And what am I supposed to do with that? Whatever you want. Jungkook laughed bitterly, brushing a hand through his hair. That's the thing, I don't know anymore. Taehyung's gaze dropped to the floor. Then let me stay, even if it's just as someone who once mattered. You're not someone who once mattered, Jungkook said, softer now, voice cracking. You're someone I've built songs around, someone who lives in every lyric I've never dared to sing. Taehyung looked up again, eyes glistening. Then let me hear them. Jungkook hesitated, then reached into the pocket of his jacket, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through the voice memos silently until he found one, the title simple, For T. He pressed play. It began with a soft hum, his voice layered over a slow piano. Then words, raw and trembling. I walked the streets we named with silence. You filled the gaps with someone else. And I still hold your echo in my mouth. Like a name I'm afraid to spell. Taehyung froze, jaw tightening. You were always a fire I couldn't hold. So I let you burn through me instead. And now I sleep with the windows open. Just to let your ghost rest in my bed. The music faded, and neither of them spoke for a long time. Taehyung's breathing had turned uneven, and Jungkook didn't dare look at him until he heard a quiet sob tear through the space between them. Taehyung had turned his face away, one hand covering his mouth as he broke, quietly, fully. Jungkook's chest cracked open at the sight. He had imagined this moment so many ways, with confrontation, with anger, with resignation. But not like this. Not with Taehyung shaking beside him like a boy who had finally run out of places to hide. Without thinking, Jungkook reached out and rested a hand gently on his shoulder. Taehyung leaned into it instantly, like the contact was oxygen. I never stopped, Taehyung whispered. I know, Jungkook said. I don't deserve another chance. No, Jungkook agreed, but maybe you deserve a beginning. Taehyung turned toward him, eyes searching. What does that look like? Jungkook took a breath. It looks like honesty, no more hiding, no more silence, no more letting fear decide for us. Taehyung nodded slowly, as if committing those words to memory. And what about love? he asked, voice barely audible. Jungkook gave him a small, tired smile. We don't chase it. We let it come back to us, on its own time. If it's real, it will. They sat there until the sky began to pale into early morning hues, until the weight of the night gave way to the fragile, golden light of a new day. And as dawn broke over the city, they were still there, shoulders brushing, hearts cracked but open, no longer asking for what once was, but waiting quietly for what could be. The light shifted, not suddenly but in a quiet, creeping way, the kind of soft change that comes with the first breath of morning. Jungkook could feel it before he saw it. A subtle shift in the cold, a paleness in the sky that bled gently into the bruised darkness above them. The edge of dawn. Neither he nor Taehyung had moved from their place on the rooftop ledge, shoulders just barely brushing, a line of contact that spoke more than the silence between them. Below, Seoul began to stir. Distant engine sounds, shutters lifting on small shops, the faintest echoes of movement, life returning to a city that never really slept. Taehyung's fingers curled loosely over the edge of the concrete beneath them. His eyes were red but dry now, fixed on the horizon like he was trying to read something written in the sky. Jungkook glanced at him, quiet, breath slow, the tension in his chest loosening one knot at a time. The words they'd exchanged during the night felt like shrapnel dug out of old wounds, painful but necessary. And now in the after there was only space. Fragile, uncertain space, but it was honest. For the first time in too long. I don't think I've ever watched the sunrise with you, Jungkook murmured. Taehyung tilted his head slightly, a soft huff escaping his lips. We were always too busy sleeping through it. Or flying to the next city, Jungkook added. Or pretending we didn't need it. That made Jungkook pause. What, the sunrise? The stillness, Taehyung said almost to himself. The kind where we don't have to perform or hide or apologize. Jungkook nodded slowly, the quiet between them stretching comfortably now. The kind that no longer screamed. It's peaceful. It's rare, Taehyung added. Jungkook leaned back on his hands, his shoulders rolling as he inhaled the cold morning air. The scent of dew and distant citrus blossoms mixed with the faint metallic tang of the rooftop railings. Do you think we can have more of this? Taehyung turned to him. Do you want that? I don't know, Jungkook answered truthfully. I want a lot of things, but I'm not sure which ones are safe to touch. Taehyung's voice was softer now, a thread. Touch anyway. Jungkook looked at him, really looked. The sharp line of his jaw, the shadow beneath his cheekbones, the way his lashes framed his eyes like brushstrokes in a painting. He was tired, beautifully, terribly tired, but there was something else beneath it now. Not desperation, not guilt, but quiet resolve, the kind of gaze that didn't beg to be believed but deserved to be. I missed you, Jungkook whispered. I know. I hated you. I know that too. And part of me still does. Taehyung didn't flinch. It's okay, as long as you don't walk away. Jungkook turned his face toward the horizon again, the sun just beginning to pull its edge above the mountains. The light hit his skin, soft and golden, warming the edges of his expression. I'm tired of walking away, he said, but I'm also tired of chasing. Taehyung shifted, drawing one leg up so he could turn toward Jungkook more fully. Then let's not run, not in any direction. Let's just stay still, for as long as we can. The suggestion was simple, but it hit something deep in Jungkook, something bruised and raw that had spent years navigating between stages, flights, facades. The idea of stillness, not as stagnation but as healing, was foreign and frightening. And yet in Taehyung's voice it felt safe. He nodded once, okay. They sat there until the sun rose high enough to paint the city gold, until the cold receded and the weight of the night lifted just enough to breathe. Jungkook's phone buzzed in his pocket at some point, but he didn't check it. He wasn't ready to leave the rooftop. Not yet. When they finally stood, the light casting long shadows behind them, Taehyung reached for the door first. But he paused, his hand resting on the rusted handle, head tilted slightly toward Jungkook. Can I walk with you? Jungkook considered it, not as a courtesy, but as a question with weight, and then he nodded. Yeah, but not all the way, just part of it. That's enough, Taehyung said. They descended the stairs in silence, the city slowly unfolding beneath their feet like a symphony waking from slumber. At the bottom, the world greeted them again, honking horns, voices rising from coffee stalls, the sharp hiss of a bus pulling away. Life resuming. Jungkook stopped at the curb looking both ways, not just for traffic but for the sheer symbolism of it. The road ahead wasn't clear, but it was there. Where are you staying? He asked. Not far, Taehyung answered, but I don't want to go back yet. Jungkook pulled his hood over his head. Let's get coffee. Taehyung smiled, small and real. Yeah. There's a place nearby. You used to hate their cups. I still do. Jungkook almost smiled, almost, and they walked side by side, a quiet rhythm returning to their steps. Taehyung didn't reach out. Jungkook didn't pull away. There was no touching, no declarations, but every glance shared was a thread reknotted. The coffee shop was mostly empty when they arrived. They took the corner booth, the one furthest from the window, out of habit. The server didn't recognize them, or if she did, she didn't show it. They ordered black coffee and honey toast, and when the drinks arrived, they didn't toast or joke or say anything at all. But Jungkook's eyes lingered on the steam rising from his cup. I think about what could have been, he said. Taehyung stared at the dark surface of his own drink. Me too. And sometimes I wish I never met you. Taehyung flinched. Why? Because then maybe I wouldn't have to compare everyone to you. Taehyung looked up sharply and Jungkook added, but most of the time, I'm grateful, even if it hurt. Taehyung didn't reply right away. Then he whispered, I'd rather be your almost than someone else's always. The words hung there like breath in cold air, real, temporary, but still warm. They didn't finish their toast. They didn't take a selfie. There were no grand gestures, just the soft return of something that might have been lost, but not dead. When they left the shop, Jungkook turned at the corner. I'm going this way. Taehyung nodded, I know. Jungkook hesitated. Then, before he could overthink it, he reached out and gently took Taehyung's wrist, not to hold him back, but to feel the pulse beneath the skin, to feel something alive. Taehyung looked at the hand on his wrist, then at Jungkook. Their eyes locked. And Jungkook whispered, I'll see you. Taehyung nodded, eyes unreadable, you will. Jungkook turned, walked. He didn't look back. But the warmth on his wrist lingered long after he disappeared into the crowd. And Taehyung stood there, smiling faintly to himself. Because maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe finally it was the beginning. Jungkook didn't go straight home. After parting from Taehyung at the crosswalk, his feet moved on their own, turning down streets without thought or direction, as if his body knew it wasn't ready to settle. His phone vibrated again in his pocket, a steady stream of messages, Jimin checking in, his manager asking about the schedule, a few fans who had somehow already spotted him that morning. He ignored them all. His thoughts moved like shadows behind a fogged window, present but difficult to see clearly. What just happened on that rooftop didn't feel real yet. It felt like a dream conjured in the middle of exhaustion, one that was fragile enough to vanish if he turned around too quickly. He walked until the sun had risen fully above the skyline, until the sounds of the morning rush began to drown the quiet that had settled in his mind. It was only then that he realized where his feet had taken him, the Riverside Park. Their Riverside Park, the one they used to visit late at night when they needed air after long rehearsals or space after fights too heavy to unpack inside four walls. He'd sat on these benches with Taehyung more times than he could count. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they just watched the water carry the city away for a while, as if Seoul itself needed rest too. Jungkook chose the third bench from the left, the one with the little chip on the armrest where Taehyung had once scratched his initials with a coin, laughing about how temporary everything was. He ran his fingers over it now, the faint mark still visible after all this time. So much had changed since that night. Their careers, their paths, their hearts, but the scratch remained, weathered, faded, but still there. He sat for a long time, watching people jog past, listening to birds call overhead, letting the world pass him by. He felt like he was outside of time. The park hadn't changed, but he had, and so had Taehyung. And maybe that was the scariest part of all, not the hurt they had caused each other, but the fact that even with all the pain, he still wanted to find a way back. By late morning, the clouds began to gather. It wasn't the kind of storm that threatened thunder or violence. It was gentle, gray, quiet. The sky grew heavy but never wept, and Jungkook leaned back, eyes tracing the movement of the clouds, remembering the way Taehyung used to narrate them as if they were characters in some silent film only he could hear. He didn't notice the figure approaching until a shadow passed across his feet. "I thought you might come here." The voice didn't startle him. If anything, it settled something in his chest. Jungkook looked up and found Taehyung standing there, his hair tousled by the breeze, coat unbuttoned, hands in his pockets. There were no cameras, no fans, no stylists, just Taehyung, just him. "I wasn't sure you'd follow," Jungkook said. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to." Taehyung sat beside him, leaving a respectful gap between them. They didn't speak at first. They just listened to the rustling leaves, the creak of a cyclist's wheels nearby, the wind brushing across the river. Then, quietly, Taehyung said, "You said you didn't want promises." "I don't," Jungkook replied. "But I still need to give you one," Taehyung said, his voice steady. "I'm not going to disappear this time, even if we never figure this out, even if we can never be what we were." Jungkook turned his head, his eyes searching. "Then what are we now?" "I don't know," Taehyung admitted, "but I'm here and I'm not hiding anymore." There was a beat and then Jungkook whispered, "I don't want to keep pretending it didn't happen, that we didn't matter." "We mattered more than anything," Taehyung said, no hesitation. "That's what made it so hard to face." Jungkook looked down at his hands, the faint tremble returning. "I loved you. Not in passing, not in secret. I loved you like a compass. You were the direction." Taehyung swallowed hard. "And I let you get lost." Jungkook nodded once, his jaw tight. "I need to say this because I never did. You broke my heart. When I saw those photos, when I realized you were going through with it, it didn't just hurt. It destroyed something in me, something I didn't know could break." Taehyung's throat tightened. "I know, I felt it, even from across the room, even through the screen. I could feel your silence louder than anything else." "I wanted to hate you," Jungkook confessed. "I tried, but all I could think about was how much I still loved you." Taehyung closed his eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "This isn't about forgiveness," Jungkook said. "It's about truth, and I don't want to run from it anymore." Taehyung opened his eyes again, turning to face Jungkook fully now. "Then let's stop running." They sat like that, facing each other, the quiet between them no longer sharp but soft, healing. Jungkook reached out slowly, uncertainly, and Taehyung didn't move, didn't breathe. Their fingers brushed, then intertwined, carefully, gently, like two people relearning how to hold each other without shattering. The moment stretched, filled with wind and breath and the soft lapping of the river against the rocks. And then Jungkook whispered, "Tell me something honest." Taehyung blinked, then nodded. "I still wear the necklace you gave me. I kept it tucked under my shirt during the wedding." Jungkook's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. "Why?" "Because part of me hoped, selfishly, that you'd know I hadn't let go, not completely." Jungkook let out a shaky breath. "I knew." "I'm sorry it took me this long to say it," Taehyung said. Jungkook squeezed his hand. "I'm just glad you finally did." They didn't make plans. They didn't talk about next steps, but they stayed on that bench long after the clouds passed, long after the sky began to clear. And when they finally stood and began walking side by side once more, there was no question about direction. They moved together, not fast, not certain, but together. Not as what they once were, but as what they were becoming. They didn't say where they were going, but their feet moved in sync, drawn into a rhythm they'd known for years, unspoken, effortless. The wind carried the scent of damp leaves and fresh bread from a nearby bakery, and somewhere across the street, a street violinist played something slow and aching that curled through the air like a confession. They passed familiar corners, old graffiti, places once theirs in secret. Neither mentioned the past, but both felt it, the way it clung to lamp posts and whispered from alleyways. At the crosswalk near the bookstore they used to sneak into during rainy nights, Taehyung paused. "Do you remember when you read me that poem?" he asked without looking at Jungkook. "The one about lost stars." Jungkook's brows furrowed for a moment. Then the memory returned like a film reel clicking back into motion. "It was raining," he said slowly. "You were half asleep. I thought you weren't listening." "I heard every word," Taehyung said. "I just couldn't look at you." "Why?" "Because I would have said something I wasn't ready to mean out loud." Jungkook looked down at the white lines of the crosswalk. "And now?" "I still remember the poem." They walked again, this time slower. There was no destination now, just movement, just company. At a small park tucked between buildings they stopped. It was mostly empty except for a child chasing pigeons and a couple sipping coffee on a bench. A wind chime hung from a tree branch, spinning in the breeze with a soft, fragile melody. Jungkook walked toward the swing set. Taehyung followed. They didn't sit. They stood there for a while, staring at the empty swings as they swayed gently, creaking against the chains. "This feels like the kind of place where you tell someone the truth," Jungkook said. Taehyung glanced at him. "Then maybe I should tell you the real reason I left that night in Tokyo." "What?" Jungkook tensed slightly but nodded. "Tell me." Taehyung exhaled slowly. "You kissed me, or I kissed you. I don't remember who leaned in first, but it happened. And for a moment it felt like the universe stopped, like everything made sense." "I remember," Jungkook whispered. "But then," Taehyung continued, "I saw you look at me like I was everything, and that's when I panicked." "Because you didn't feel it." "No," Taehyung said quickly, fiercely. "Because I did. I felt it so much I thought I might never breathe again, and I was afraid that if I let myself fall, I wouldn't know how to stop." Jungkook's eyes were glassy now. "You should have said something." "I thought leaving would protect us both," Taehyung murmured. "But all it did was ruin the only thing that ever felt real." A soft breeze stirred the wind chime again, and the sound broke the heaviness for just a second. Jungkook reached out, gripping the swing chain beside him. "I waited for you to come back," he said. "After that night, I kept expecting you to knock on my door or send a message, but you just moved on." "I didn't move on," Taehyung said, stepping closer. "I just buried it." "Same thing." "No," Taehyung said. "One is healing, the other is punishment." Jungkook turned to him then, eyes sharp. "And which one did you think I was doing?" Taehyung's voice softened. "I thought you were healing, but now I think we both just kept bleeding quietly, hoping no one would notice." They stood like that for a moment, eyes locked, time slowing around them. The sound of the world faded. There was only breath, memory, the gentle sway of the swings between them. Then Jungkook stepped forward. He didn't touch Taehyung, didn't speak. He just looked. And Taehyung said, "I would give anything to go back and choose you." Jungkook's breath caught. "Not just in secret," Taehyung added. "Not in shadows. I would have chosen you in every light, on every stage, even if it meant walking away from everything else." Jungkook closed his eyes, jaw trembling. "But you didn't." "I know," Taehyung whispered, "and I live with that." The honesty in his voice was too much. It disarmed the armor Jungkook had been wearing piece by piece. He inhaled sharply and turned away, walking a few steps before stopping. I don't know how to let you back in. I'm not asking you to. Jungkook turned around, confused. I just want to stay close, Taehyung said. Even if it's from the edges. Even if it's as the person who once knew how your laughter sounded at 2 a.m., I want to be allowed to remember. Jungkook blinked and the tears came this time. Not loud, not violent, just quiet drops that trailed down his cheeks like secrets finally free. I remember everything, he said. The hotel curtains, the sound of your bracelets, the way you used to hold your breath before you told me a lie. Taehyung smiled, eyes wet. I only lied to protect what we had. And that's the part that hurts most, Jungkook replied. That you thought love was something to protect from. Taehyung took a step closer. What if now I believe it's something to protect with? Jungkook looked at him and his voice broke. Then you're years too late. Taehyung nodded. Maybe, but I'm still here. The swing creaked behind them again, moving gently in the breeze like time refusing to stop. Jungkook didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just stood there, eyes closed, letting the tears fall, not wiping them away. Taehyung reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a small, folded piece of paper. He extended it carefully. Jungkook hesitated, then took it. What is it? He asked. My vows, Taehyung said. The real ones, the ones I never read, the ones I wrote for you. Jungkook stared at the folded note in his hands. The paper was soft at the edges, creased, aged. He didn't open it. Not yet. Taehyung didn't wait for him to. He turned, ready to walk away, giving Jungkook the space he needed. But before he could take 2 steps, Jungkook's voice stopped him. Wait. Taehyung turned. Jungkook unfolded the note with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the page. Then he read aloud, voice low, cracking, vulnerable. I vow to never let fear steal my words again. I vow to choose you even when the world doesn't. I vow to tell the truth even when it's terrifying. I vow to love you in the quiet, in the chaos, in the moments we think don't matter because they always do. You are my song, my stillness, my storm, and I vow to never run from you again. Silence. Taehyung was crying now, no longer trying to hide it. Jungkook folded the paper again, held it to his chest. Why didn't you say this? He asked. Taehyung's voice was wrecked. Because I thought I lost the right. Jungkook stepped forward, slowly, purposefully. He stopped just inches from Taehyung. You didn't, he whispered. Taehyung looked at him, hope blooming like dawn behind shattered glass. And Jungkook said, not yet. Their eyes met. And for the first time in years, they didn't look away. They stood there, 2 hearts still healing, still afraid but no longer alone. And this time, when the wind blew between them, it didn't carry them apart. It carried them forward.